All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at a really interesting relationship between two countries, Ethiopia and Eritrea.
Okay.
And specifically we're going to be looking at Eritrea's independence and kind of what happened after that. So imagine you're a country, you're landlocked, and you're less than 30 miles from the sea. But your neighbor, who you helped gain independence, is blocking you from getting to the sea. That's the situation that we're looking at today.
Wow, okay.
With Ethiopia and Eritrea. So it's a really fascinating case of how international relations can sometimes go in a direction that you don't expect. So the source material that we're looking at today really highlights all the effort that Ethiopia put into helping Eritrea gain its independence.
Right.
And this was even while Ethiopia was transitioning to its own new government. In fact, they organized a referendum back in 1993 that allowed the Eritrean people to choose their own future.
So that's a big deal for a country that's in transition.
Yeah.
To say, you know what, we're going to let go of this part of ourselves and be fair about it.
Exactly. And it really shows you the good faith that they had in the whole process.
Yeah.
And, they really went above and beyond to make sure that this referendum was fair and transparent. They even invited international observers to come and monitor it. And they upheld the results, even though it meant that they would lose a significant part of their coastline. So this is really setting the stage for what happened next, which is even more surprising. Just a few years after Eritrea gained its independence, they basically blocked Ethiopia from accessing the sea.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly, you have this country, Ethiopia, over 120 million people, and they are landlocked, even though the coastline is less than 30 miles away.
So close.
So close.
Yeah.
And, a lot of international observers were really shocked by this move because Ethiopia had been such a crucial ally in Eritrea's fight for independence. So this is where it gets really interesting. We have to consider the historical context here to kind of understand why Eritrea might have done this. And the source that we're looking at today suggests that there was maybe an understanding during that time that Eritrea would allow Ethiopia to continue to use its ports. So how did Eritrea actually break free from Ethiopia? And what made this whole thing so different from other independence movements?
Well, it's one of those stories that, kind of flips the script on how we usually think about countries fighting for their freedom. Eritrea's fight for independence was a long one.
For sure, decades of struggle against Ethiopian rule.
Exactly, and especially under this brutal regime, the Derg.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about the Derg. That was a dark period.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just Eritreans who suffered.
Right, a lot of Ethiopians, too.
Totally. So you can imagine how tough it was for people on both sides.
Really tough, yeah.
And here's the interesting thing, this shared struggle against this, common enemy.
The Derg.
Yeah, it actually brought Eritrean independence fighters and Ethiopian opposition groups together.
Wow. So they're fighting side by side.
Exactly.
Against this oppressive regime.
It's wild, right? Finding unity in this, really unexpected way.
So I'm guessing when the Derg regime finally fell in 1991.
Huge turning point.
For both countries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially for Eritrea.
Right. Suddenly independence was, actually possible.
Yeah, it felt within reach for the first time.
But our source is saying it wasn't just their own victories that won Eritrea their independence.
Right.
They're claiming Ethiopia played a key part.
Yeah, to the point of saying Eritrea owes them a debt of gratitude.
A debt of gratitude, huh?
Strong words.
That's a really strong statement. And it makes me wonder, what did Ethiopia actually do that was so important?
Well, after the Derg fell, Ethiopia actually helped set up this referendum on independence for Eritrea in 1993.
Okay, so they let the Eritrean people decide their own future.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a casual thing either. The UN was there supervising the whole process.
Wow. So it was legitimate?
Oh, yeah. And the vote was overwhelmingly for independence.
No surprise there.
Nope. And get this, Ethiopia was the first country to officially recognize Eritrea as an independent nation.
Really? So that gave them a legitimacy that I guess a lot of other breakaway states don't have.
Exactly. It's a huge deal.
So it sounds like even if Eritrea had won independence militarily, Ethiopia could have still made things really hard for them on the world stage.
Oh, for sure.
Wow.
And that's actually a point that our source makes by comparing Eritrea to Somaliland.
Somaliland.
Yeah, they declared independence a while back, and they have a government and everything.
Right. I remember learning about them.
But because Somalia refuses to play ball, Somaliland is still not recognized internationally.
Wow. That's rough for them.
It really is. And it makes you think, what if more countries acted like Ethiopia did?
That's a really interesting question, right?
For some Eritreans, it might feel condescending, like they don't need Ethiopia's approval.
Right.
But for others, it might be seen as just acknowledging the historical reality.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, to recap, Eritrea's independence was this hard-fought victory. But according to our source, it also depended heavily on Ethiopia's cooperation.
Yeah, it really challenges our ideas of how independence happens and how we interpret historical events.
And that leaves us with one final question. What do you think the future holds for Eritrea and Ethiopia, given this shared history and this complex relationship and this debt of gratitude?
It's definitely something to ponder, and as we keep exploring these intertwined stories on the world stage, it's a question worth keeping in mind.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving into this with me today.
It's my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time.
Take care.
Bye.